What up, what up, what up? Welcome to another episode of New Orleans Basketball and New Orleans Network podcast. As always, I'm your host, Raphael Rattler, joined by my fellow middle brother, Garrick Rattler. What's poppin' with you, bro?
What up, bro? Everything's all good on this side. Enjoying some good WNBA basketball. Of course, gotta always start there. Got a lot of good things going on. Angel Reese out there cooking and things like that. But it's the NBA draft. And man, let me tell you something. I love the NBA draft, right? Because the NBA draft, let me see. Let me put my headphones in. So the NBA draft is like, it's almost like Game of Thrones, right? Because like everybody is trying to like, guess who's this person going there, this person going there, or who are these people talking to, and things. And so everybody's trying to get their sources out, right? We call it sources season, and everybody's like, sources say. And it's like you never really know until they draft, right? We saw people dropping in the draft so far, obviously still going on, but we saw people dropping in the draft. We saw people rising in the draft. I think is one of the best times of the year. I mean, the NBA does the offseason like nobody else. Like it always keeps you engaged, always locked in. And this draft was no exception. And the Pelicans have made their draft pick. We're gonna get into it. I have seen the tweets. I have gotten the messages about is Zion gonna ask out. When do we start the riot on Airline Drive? When does the boycott begin? Let's all take a breath and relax a little bit. So that's me on my side, man. How's everything on your side?
Everything is blessed. Glad to be back stateside for this NBA draft. Yeah. I'll tell you what, the respect I'll give to the NBA draft is much better than the NFL draft, where every single draft pick got a sob story. At least the NBA tries to show highlights and talk about the things that they've done and focus on their career. The NFL be like, what is the saddest thing we can put on the screen right now? And
his second cousin was shot on his dead mother's birthday. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. So at least shout out to the NBA for trying to fill us in, because like half the draft, you're like, oh, well, he played for what country and he did what with who? And so it's hard. It's especially in the draft like this where there wasn't a ton of like key names or names that have been around and circulated around the NBA for years and years. Like at least they tried their best to.
There is one. He ain't get drafted yet, but
he might get drafted tomorrow. So,
Brian. I feel like we've been watching Bronny in the draft for like 5 years now. It's crazy.
No kidding. But before we get into the Pelicans pick tonight at 21, make sure you guys follow us on Twitter, on X, on IG, on TikTok. That's NO Basketball, no E. Make sure you're liking the episode below, and make sure if you're not, subscribe to the channel, New Orleans Basketball. So before we jump into the Pelican selection of Yves Missi from Baylor at 21, let's talk about the league a little bit. So last night is kind of when like things started popping off, when the Knicks were like, oh, you see this money right here? We call those fun coupons, and decided to go ahead and bite the bullet and give the Brooklyn Nets every draft pick from now until my child has graduated to high school for Mikal Bridges to create the Nova Knicks. What are your thoughts on that? And then today, re-signing OG and making their roster, they're already the top seed in the East already. So, they kind of made themselves like, we're right there with Boston. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think this is where like frustration for Pelicans fans come, right? You see these teams and it's like the SpongeBob meme, right? Like you're looking outside the window and you see everybody else running on the floor and you just like, well, you turn around and there's no movement at all. And so listen, they went all in. I thought that they would hold hold all of those assets for a star trade, but they're banking on this Villanova thing really being a thing. Those guys won a national championship, so I guess they taking that chance. I don't know you trade 5 first rounders and a pick swap because you think all of those picks, this team is going to be together for that long, and so all of those picks are going to be in the 20s. And so that's why you make the trade. That's why you re-sign OG Anunoby. And so listen, if this team stays together and they competing in the Eastern Conference Finals with Boston year after year after year, then the trade is worth it, right? It's this is what you haul assets together for, right? To go in and make a trade that you think will put you over the hump. And they went all in, and you can't do nothing but respect it. So we'll see how it plays out against that Celtics team. But I think this is the kind of framework of trade that you would want, or people would want the Pelicans to make, whether it's right or wrong. But that is the kind of trade that people are looking for. People who want that to happen, looking for the Pels to make.
And here's where I just don't agree with any of that. Look at what the Knicks did last year, right? Like, they're a top 3 seed in the East. They're players in all NBA caliber. They put some things together. They bring Josh Hart in. They make a little run. Every single player gets hurt in the playoffs, and they get knocked out. The Pelicans won 0 playoff games. They're not in the same spot, right? Like, you're not in the same position. And so on one hand, I can see a team say, we're close, let's go for it. Unfortunately, the Pelicans still don't know how close they really are. But with that trade, the Nets decided finally, we're going to blow it up. They make the side trade with Houston. They get their draft picks back, so it's advantageous for them to blow it up. Nick Claxton's name gets thrown out there, and all of a sudden, Pelicans fans are like, okay, another player you can go get. And then the Nets decide that they are going to re-sign him for some reason, I don't know why, for $100 million. Here's my first thoughts. That's a long contract for some reason. And that's a $20 million contract for a player who's ascending, but for a team that's starting from zero. Do you think the Pels were involved in the signing trade and they were like, that price is too steep for us, Knicks? Or do you think he just wanted to stay and the Nets wanted to, I guess, help him bring along the next wave of Nets players?
Yeah, I do think the Pelicans were in on those conversations. I do think that they called around for Nick Claxton. And I think, when the rumor first came out that the Nets were willing to pay Nick Claxton that money, I think that came out months ago. That they were going into free agency willing to pay Nick Claxton this money, and everybody kind of was like, let's see if they're telling the truth, or if this is just a posturing situation. But it turns out that Nick Claxton and his agent went in there and said, listen, you told us you was going to give us 20-25 million. We're here for that. And if somebody wants to trade that, that's what I want to be paid. And, the Pelicans being the Pelicans and not being in the market to be spending, that kind of money on a center, at least, that's their philosophy. I think they backed away from it and they figured, I think that is kind of when, if there wasn't going to be a big trade, I think that's where they kind of figured, all right, like we're going to be looking towards a Khalil Ware, towards the Philip Gauci, and then obviously landing on Yves Missi. So I think that they were in the conversations for Nick Claxton. I just think that the Pelicans thought that they could get at least some of the value in that draft pick. We'll see. But shout out to Nick Claxton for staying in on business and going to get that bag.
Right. So there was the photo of Brandon Ingram with Jose Alvarado. And again, if you turn on any NBA, ESPN sports media channel, Brandon Ingram's name has been shouted every single day as a player to be traded. Again, I don't know if necessarily just because something didn't happen today, that necessarily impacts anything over the next week or so. Because, again, everyone as a consensus can say that this draft was not the greatest draft going in terms of potential stars and things like that. So the fact that people are not centering major trades around this draft would make a whole lot of sense. Like, a lot of the trades you'll see may be player for player or future picks with better draft classes coming up and things like that. Personally, if I'm a team looking at the Pelicans, the best assets you have are the players already on your team and some of those picks next year, like the Bucks pick or the Lakers pick or your pick in the future. And so I don't want the number 21st pick in this draft anyway, right? And so if you're the Hawks or if you're the Cavs or whoever that may be in discussions with them, I don't think tonight's draft necessarily changes anything from that standpoint. But again, I will be interested to see if there is a trade for Brandon or what that looks like and who's the team on the other end and what are you getting back if it gets to that point. So let's jump into it. The Pelicans at 21. draft Yves Missi, a player that we highlighted as a potential fit in this draft. Out of Baylor, 19 years old. He's got the project label to him, similar to Jackson Hayes, which again gives Pelicans fans a little bit of angst when it comes to that. But he's a little bit different, right? Like he's a high motor player. He grew as he went on throughout the year. But he hasn't been playing basketball that long. And so he's an extremely raw player. He's really relying upon his athleticism while his basketball IQ grows. Look, here's where I'm at with it. I don't know why people are so upset because you didn't draft LeBron James at 21. Most players at 21 are projects. Like the odds outside of like the top 4 or 5 picks of every NBA draft are terrible in terms of finding a player who's going to be on your roster long term. Everyone's going to be a pick. And so this particular pick, or a project, so this particular pick to me, what did we say last year going into the draft? You need to find your Jalen Duren or you need to find your shooter. They went with Jordan Hawkins because Derek Lively were on the board. So what did we say going into this draft? You need to find your rim protector. And so you pick the best one available, who some South say may be the best defensive center in this draft. And he's young and obviously has a high ceiling in front of him. What are your thoughts on the player and the draft pick tonight?
Yeah. So we like you said, we covered him on our center kind of breakdown. And when we got to him, I think, as a lot of other places and a lot of other media outlets have said that, Kel'el Ware was kind of the dream, right? The kind of like the Kristaps Porzingis type of build, can shoot, can defend and rim protect. And then when we talked about Missi, I kind of was like, I didn't really want him for a couple of things, right? He's not a real offensive threat. He took 0 3-pointers his 1 year at Baylor, and things like that. But as the draft went on and it came down to everyone knew that the Pelicans needed rim protection. Like David Griffin said it last season after the season ended, didn't address it in the offseason, went the entire season without it. So guess what? Going into the draft, it was still a need. And so when you look at who was available, right, and you were going to make this pick regardless, could you have traded back or whatever the case is, maybe, possibly, you don't know, but you had to make this pick. Your time was on the clock. This is a guy with a really, really high motor. I think that's the first thing I am excited about because, how many times as, all of the big men, right, whether it was JV, whether it was Larry Nance, whether it was, anybody else out there playing the 5 at any point in time, those guys either felt small and couldn't really deal with the game I think about is Larry Nance against Mo Wagner and Jonathan Isaac and just all of those guys out jumping him over and over again. Or they were like too slow-footed and big in JV's case. You never really got another bull in the china shop like Zion in the paint, fighting for boards and just wreaking havoc down there with that high motor. And I think that's something that is going to be useful for the Pelicans, that kind of motor. Now, he's not a terrific rebounder, which is weird as hell. And so he's going to have to fix that. But the shot blocking and the vertical threat is there. I think, you needed to get one. You probably needed to get 2, right? You just watched Dallas show you that you could have 2 lower impact defenders in Kyrie and Luka, as long as you had, Daniel Gafford and Derek Lively back there doing some of the things. And a lot of the things that they say about this guy is, he's raw and got a lot of time. He's only been playing basketball for less than 3 years. And so he has a lot to learn as far as basketball goes. But I think there's a lot of things that he can do. This is not a home run pick. Like, you're not trying to hit a home run. Like, you have a lot of the guys on the floor that who are there to do that job. And some of the guys who need to step up, and whether that's better playing or getting more playing time, and guys like Dyson and Jordan Hawkins. This was a fit pick, right? And this is the draft to kind of do that, without a lot of guys available who are game changers at that point in time. And so, for what the Pelicans need and what they've been needing, I think it's a good sign. I think it's a good, solid pick. What I am interested about it, if and I don't think this is the last roster move by any stretch of the imagination. Right. But if this is a guy who screams out to be played, this goes back to the coaching philosophy. Is Willie Green going to put this guy out there and allow him to play through mistakes, allow him to learn on the fly? What Jason Kidd did with Derek Lively, right? Threw him out there, and before you know it, he was starting in the finals because he had to be, he was just that good, and he proved it. But he learned a lot throughout his entire season. Is Willie Green going to give him that opportunity to play if it comes that it needs to be playing? I agree that he probably needs to be the third big, right? Like a guy that's a break in case of emergency, and which means that you go get two other guys that could play. But if this is a situation where he needs to play, is he going to be able to get that opportunity? You still got EJ Liddell, you still got Carlo Makovich, guys who are still on the roster with contracts, like who need to also be playing. Are you going to play some of those guys? And how's that going to work out? So he's not Khalil Ware. He's not the offensive threat, right? He has, again, no three-pointers taken his entire freshman year at Baylor. I am worried that the last game we saw him play against Clemson, he was I think I have it here. His last game he played against Clemson in the in the tournament, he played 19 minutes, went 1 for 4. With 4 rebounds. Like it wasn't great. It wasn't a great showing, but he has had a 25-point game in his career. He's had a 5-block game. He's had a 4-block game. This is a guy with a lot of defensive potential, and like you say, could be the best defensive big in the draft. We'll see if he gets to reach that potential and if he gets an opportunity to play and contribute. But again, this was a pick for need, something that needed to be on the roster. The Pelicans addressed it. We'll see what moves on forward.
Here's where I sit on him as a player. I think it's a perfect fit because what did we talk about a couple pods ago? Unless you have Joel Embiid or Anthony Davis or Nikola Jokic, like you don't have one of the 7 or 8 bigs that demand the ball, that demand the presence. So most people should be center by committee. And I think he fits a role that you could use multiple centers in. He's a great rim runner. Here's where I'm very curious. You talk about the fact that, hey, he doesn't really have an offensive game. The thing that he did the best, the way he scored his 10 points per game, 11 points per game last season, were dunks next to the rim. We just made a whole podcast about how the Pelicans were awful in terms of just easy buckets next to the rim that you could just throw lobs. Like you never saw those unless they were going to Zion. Here's my question. Are you going to get the passer or are you going to approve as a team to throw those lobs? Because those are easy points that, again, I don't think the Pelicans had the personnel to capitalize on this year. Well, if he's getting minutes, are you going to put him in positions to succeed from that standpoint? And so, no, I think that he probably is not going to start the year as a starter or maybe not even in the rotation. But I think there absolutely could be a role for him and minutes for him as you progress through the season and see what he's made of. You talk about Willie Green not playing young players. I absolutely agree, and we've made our gripes about Jordan Hawkins and things like that. But what he has shown is if you have the propensity to play defense and you have the ability to switch, he's going to give that opportunity. The thing that Yves Missi does well is play defense, right? And so if he could start there, remember, Herb, again, we wouldn't even been talking this. There was no day 2 draft when Herb came around. Herb couldn't score at all, right? That wasn't his game at all. He had plenty of games where he scored 4 points, 3 points, but he was a savant defensively. And you could come into training camp and show, hey, I can switch 1 through 5. Man, we watched the Pelicans throw Jeremiah Robinson Earl at the 5. You telling me this young guy can't get no minutes and get no rebounds? I don't believe that. There's always opportunities for somebody with his athleticism to get playing time. I just think that if he's going to be able to show, hey, I'm not a liability on the offensive end, someone's going to have to feed him point. Maybe that's Zion. Zion was very good at finding the dunker spot and finding the easy buckets. It's just he would throw it to JV, and JV would catch it and pick 9 times, and then there would be no points afterwards.
Put his back to the basket.
So if you had a guy who was more lateral or more vertically inclined, I think that there would be more opportunities there. Again, you talk about the rebounding piece. I don't know if that's young. Like if you look at Derek Lively's rebounding in college, it wasn't great either. And then his rookie year in the NBA, he was incredible from that. Like, I think with high motor players, if you get them in the right system and you get with the right coaching, I think you can get that piece out. It's just to your point, how much of a liability are you going to be on the offensive? Are you going to be a zero, right? Because if that's the case, you can't be on the court. Here's my biggest issue with all of this, though. If he's like, hey, if you want to say, hey, I don't want to pay $25 million to Nick Claxton, or if I don't want to pay $20 million to Nick Claxton because I think I can find a similar player or someone close to that and build him within my system, you need to have a backup plan. Like there needs to be a move in the next week or so that go get you a starting center, because if not, like I said, I just don't see JV coming back. And so if this move was made, hey, we've got center number 2 or center number 3, you still need to be really gunning for, you need a starting center, because again, that was the biggest hole on this team. What other picks around the NBA tonight kind of intrigued you and made you think, that's an interesting fit?
I'm going to tell you one thing that is wild. The Southwest Division looks like a carnival, like a freak show. You got Wemby, you got Luka, you got Zion. Now you got Zach Edey in Memphis. I'm like, what are these? What? What are these like freaking? These are not the players that Dr. James Naismith had in mind when he hung a peach basket from a pole. But yeah, I think the Heat getting Khalil Ware after they just gave Bam that big. That big extension. I think that they are trying to kind of build their own version of a Twin Towers, but like Bam sliding down to the 4 is really intriguing to me. The Lakers getting Dalton Connect from Tennessee.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe he dropped that far down. It's crazy to see, what age does to a guy's draft pick. A draft stock. I think he's going to be great. I think he's a guy who can shoot. I think and like a hooper. Like he puts the ball in the ground, he talking trash. Like he's very athletic. I think that was a pretty good pick as well. And then also I like Minnesota trading up to get Rob Dillingham. I don't know how they gave up a pick, a later pick that might come back to hurt him if Ant leaves. But I kind of like that kind of electricity and scoring with Minnesota. I think that was a good fit. But the Southwest Division, man, you're gonna have to bring it in the Southwest Division with just the amount of unique players in that division. It is going to be a fun. It's going to be like a carnival. Like every day, you're going to be watching Zach Edey versus Zion, or Wemby versus Luka, and Sengun versus just a whole bunch of weird things.
Yeah.
So, yeah, just a whole bunch of like crazy body types and weird players. But what about you? Would you see in the draft that surprised you?
You hit it on the head with the Spurs. Like you even talk about like Stephon Castle with Wemby. I think again. Everybody's been talking this offseason about Wemby getting a point guard, somebody who can facilitate and set up for him. Like, I know he can't shoot, but I think that's a combo to get started. Like, the Spurs been here, done that. Like, people were talking about, pressure being put on the Spurs to jumpstart things, and they just kind of sat back, and they're going to continue to add pieces and grow and watch Wemby continue to set. I think that's a great start. Him, Vassell, and Wemby, that's a great little core to continue to add on as these bad contracts get floated and things like that. I think that's a big one. And then the Rockets getting Reed Shepherd. The Rockets were really good defensively. I'm very interested to see them getting Phoenix's picks back, even though Phoenix saying they don't want to make any trades. I still think I was having a conversation with one of my boys earlier today. If you really look at the West, like really look at it next season, the only team that's probably not going to be like playing very hard is the Blazers. Memphis is going to be back. The Spurs just are retooling. Houston's adding to the arsenal. Like all these teams that didn't make it or that were at the bottom are going to be right back fighting again. And so I just think this next like 2 to 3 weeks is going to be very, very interesting in the NBA. The Pelicans walk away with their rim protector finally after what, like 5-6 seasons of potentially of the future. But let's see what the next week has in store. Something tells me there's going to be fireworks for the 4th of July. What you got left for the people, Garrick?
As always, you never know what people are going through, so give someone a smile today. I can't wait to see if Yves Missi gets on the floor. I want to see him screening for Zion. I want to see them two like just have people in like that really hurts trying to guard them too. Listen, he's not
hunting players that can't defend. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I need to see some of that with this guy. He is a rock solid screener and energy guy. Like, let's use some of that to screen for Zion as well. Listen, the Pelicans are not done. They are not done. I understand everybody wants to bring the sticks out and tie David Griffin to it and burn him at the stake. I get it. The Pelicans are not done. This is the trade season has just begun. People, we still got the Paul George story to go down. There's a lot of moves that people are doing, and there are calls being made. Things are happening. Give it some time. I understand that it needs to happen as soon as possible, but they will get the chance. Like you said, the Pelicans walk away with their rim protector. We'll see what he can contribute. Don't go find the man Twitter and run him off before he even get to the city. Don't do that. Let him come and let him show you his rim protection and his switchability, and the Pelicans will be fine. They'll be fine. So with that being said, follow myself at Garrick_Rattler. Follow my brother at Raphael. Follow myself at Garrick_Rattler. Follow my brother at Raphael_Rattler. Follow the page at No Basketball No E. Like and subscribe.